Hello, I am Mary Mason, President of the Friends of Old Dover. The Dover Days Committee, along with the Friends of Old Dover, also known as the Historical Society of Dover, are pleased to offer you a virtual celebration of our city's heritage. Dover Days began in 1933 by Mabel Lloyd Ridgely as a day with the storied houses and gardens of Old Dover. Through the years, the Dover Days has grown into a lively festival with parades, maypole dancing, historic reenactions, community speakers, and food and craft vendors organized by the Dover Days Committee. Due to the ongoing restrictions of the COVID pandemic, we will celebrate again this year with a series of online lectures on topics such as pre-colonial history, Victorian architecture, religion, ethnic groups, education, horticulture, and social history of Dover. We are proud of our traditions, and our focus is on preserving Dover's historic and architectural heritage for future generations. We hope you enjoy our online program. The Dover Days Committee and the Friends of Old Dover look forward to spending Dover Days with you in person the way it used to be next year. A special thank you goes to the students of the ARVED, Audio, Radio, Video Engineering Design of Caesar Rodney High School for their assistance with this program.
My name is Ann Holden Thompson. I attended Booker T Junior High School, as it was called, from grade 1 through 10. Booker T has meant a lot to me. As a matter of fact, we used to live next door to the school. Booker T was also the social hub for a lot of the black activities in Dover. Every spring of the year, we would have what they called May Day. And the other feeder schools, which were at that time called the covered schools, which ran up to grades, maybe some ran to grades 8, others to grade 6 or so, 7, and they would come to Booker T. And as I can recall, we had to do the maypole dance. We had to be in white. The boys had to be in white. I can recall we did sack races, based softball throws, things like that. I also can recall that on Sundays there was baseball. I don't know if these men were semi-pros or not, but I would come over and watch the baseball game every Sunday. They would have it during the baseball season. Many of the, at that time, we had like school conventions where the teachers would meet here, the colored teachers at that time. So, other than that, Booker T was like a family. I can recall on Friday evenings, we would have a dance. And in, in the auditorium, we would have, because we played basketball in the auditorium, it was the main meeting hall. And there were lights on the side, but they had like a cage over top of it to protect them. And we had one basket at the end of the entrance, which was way up high. But when you look straight forward, there was a stage, so you couldn't hang a basket. So what they did, they put the basket on 2 large poles, and that was the other. And we played teams from Maryland, also from Pennsylvania, as far as Coatesville, Pennsylvania. teams as far away as, because we couldn't play the white school. So we had to play all black schools. So we were transported to Cambridge, Maryland, Princess Anne, Maryland, Coatesville, Elton, Maryland. Those are the ones I can think of right now. But having such a small community as that, many of us got to know those players, and we also became friends. I can remember we had to go over to Eastern Maryland, and they didn't have a gym. We went to play over in Eastern Maryland, and this at one point, I guess it must have been a church, I'm not quite sure, but it was like a barn-like building, and it had like a platform, and it had a stove. Now, at this time of year, you're playing in March and February, you know, that's when basketball starts. And this pot-belly stove would be sitting in the corner, and we could only, you couldn't make a foul shot. If you made it too high, the lights would go up. So that was quite an experience. And then over in Chestertown, Maryland, they finally got the black high school, but we had to go through a cemetery, the black cemetery yard, to get to the high school. And if we won the game, they were not very happy about that, so they would be waiting for us, and we sort of had to fight our way back to the bus. But even with all that, we still became friends. I can remember a lady by the name of Queen Bell and her orchestra came here to Boca T. And I can't remember what kind of dance it was, but it was, I don't know why I was here. I think it was mostly for grown-ups, but somehow I was here. And I remember enjoying her because she played the organ, and it was really nice. Outside of Booker T, I came back and I also taught here. So I wasn't on staff, but I substituted many times here. So Booker T, and it's just Booker T. And when we heard that they were going to get rid of this building, it was not well taken by the community.
Yeah.
Because this was our place, our only place that we had to socialize because of segregation. It wasn't what we wanted, it was what we had, and to take that away from us was just a bit too much. So, long live Booker T.
My name is Ashlyn Darling, and I went to Booker T for 5 years, and I think it was one of the best school experiences I've ever had, between making friends, the field trips, definitely one of the best educational experience I've had. I went through Alpha. I know some of my favorite teachers were from Booker T, Miss Tierson, Miss Robinson, Miss Burton, and some of the friends I made there are still my friends today, so Booker T is very special to me.
I am Clarence Wallace Hicks. Many people know me by C. Wallace Hicks. I'm married to Helen Pleasanton Hicks. I attended school here as a student from the 6th grade through the 10th grade. I met my wife here, and we have been married for over 70 years. Now, to get to the subject of the renovation of the school, I was at a board meeting when the said that they were going to tear the school down. I opposed it, and I stood up and I told them my feeling on it. The next morning, I got a call from the president of the school board, Martin Burns. He asked me if I would make up a committee, head a committee, and come up with ideas on what they should do with the school. I put together a committee, and I was hoping some of them would be here today, but I don't see them yet. We worked for many months, meetings in the old section of this building. Then we presented to the board the thoughts that we had come up with and the things that we felt should be done. And I did bring that along because I thought it might come up. Here's what we asked for. That West Dover School be retained as an elementary school which provides the highest physical and education standards. West Dover Elementary School be renovated and given back its original name, Booker T. Washington. A plaque or plaques of appropriate quality and design be placed in a permanent location in and outside the school building. The plaque should bear the name Booker T. Washington. Biographical information and history of the school. The Capital, number 4, the Capital School District hire an architect to develop renovation plans which address the needs of the teachers and the students. Number 5, West Dover Elementary School, as recommended, be placed at the top priority. We didn't get that, but we got everything else. And I'm very pleased with what I see. And the members on that committee, many of them are not alive anymore, but I have the list of everybody who served on that committee. Now the board approved everything that we came up with. Superintendent at the time was Hamilton, I think his name was. And he went along with it. And here we are. It's a beautiful place and I'm happy with it. And if anybody says that they were on this committee, it's not on my list, they're not telling the truth. So, so I'm happy, you know, you've been to our house and you've seen, we've talked these things over with you and everything. My wife was the first black and only black secretary in this building for 30-some years. I don't know the exact years, she has it. And so that's where we are. I'm happy with it and I hope that it will continue.
Good afternoon. I was the proud principal of Booker T. Washington Elementary School from 2012 to 2017. One of the greatest accomplishments I think we have here is such a beautiful site here for the service of our children. One of the things I'd like to also share is many thanks to the faculty, staff, and the children and the community. Because when in 2012, we first, in conjunction with the renovation project, we started renovation of our instructional programming here. And we went from one of Delaware's 13 lowest performing schools to one of Delaware's one of 2 Title I distinguished schools, national Title I distinguished schools. And we did that during the renovation period. So it was an occupied space renovation, and the children did well with all the noise and other things, and the faculty and staff also with the changes that took place. I'd like to thank several people. I'd like to thank Dr. Michael D. Thomas for the inception of this program and also being a collaborative leader who also listened to the input of others as we provided a space that were in the best interest of the children that we serve. I'd also like to thank EDIS and Andrew DiSabatino III and his work, and also the construction superintendent extraordinary Mark Norquist, who we interacted daily throughout this renovation project. He also sought to do what was in the best of children each and every day throughout the duration of the construction project. And also would like to thank Maureen Ferries, who also had her ear to the ground each and every day, finding out what the needs of teachers, faculty, staff, the community, as well as our children each and every day. And I'd like to thank my wife, who endured the countless hours in 14, 15, and sometimes 30-hour days in bringing me my clothes and change clothes for the following day throughout the renovation project. One of the things I would like to hope is my sincerest hope is the mission of the two historical rooms and also the historical display cases, that people actually use these to their fullest, because it really captures the legacy that took place from Booker T. Washington then and to Booker T. Washington now. And I'd like for all of the former alumni to know that we still hold dear to that legacy was left of doing the best and being the best in the world and getting better. BTW, best in the world. Take care.
Booker T. Washington in 1957, and I taught 5th grade for 2 years, and I taught 1st grade for 1 year, which was really an experience, because I had taught 1st grade in the elementary school, but not a whole room of 1st graders. And that was the most interesting and time that I had here teaching the 1st grade. Then I wanted to be a 3rd grade teacher, so then I taught 3rd grade until I left in 1966. And in 3rd grade, I think my 1st or 2nd year in 3rd grade, there were 80 students. Miss George had 40 something, and I had 40. That was, and the desks were in rows, pushed together. I wrote that instead of having a space between, we had space between the rows of the children. So then, after that year, they hired another teacher, and it was 3 of us teaching 3rd grade. And as a 3rd grade teacher, I enjoyed teaching the 3rd grade because I had found out, I said, when the children get in the 3rd grade, they know their first and last name, and they can count to 10. And I also was a teacher that liked to teach folk dancing, and well, we did the dancing, and of course I wasn't very good on singing, but I could teach the dancing, and I enjoyed doing that. And
The maypole dance?
and I say, I enjoyed teaching because I love children.
Oh, that's great.
Yes,
That's really good.
and that,
How many years were you here teaching?
so what?
How many years were you teaching here?
I taught from 57 till 66.
Wow.
That was how many, that was, and 66, they integrated the schools. So then I went to Fairview Elementary School and taught until I retired.
Oh, very good.
Yes, but as I enjoyed teaching.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much.
You're
We
welcome.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, so that was a time when schools were segregated. We, enjoyed the community that was built during that time, and I certainly have a lot of good memories of both the students and the teachers. and learned quite a bit.
That's great.
So what, did you have certain questions? Or?
No, we're just looking for memories we can share with the students here, you know.
Yeah, so I guess one memory I remember in the 6th grade, we did an around the world, and we each were different countries, took part in different countries. Do you remember that? And I was Iran, and and we had just kind of this display of all the countries represented by the students in that 6th grade class. So that was Mrs. Palmer's 6th grade class. And then I guess I remember my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Blackson, is that I learned about the months. So 30 days has September, April, June, and November. I know every month and the day because of that.
That's a good thing to remember.
That's a good thing to remember.
Yeah.
I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Elfrida Fisher Dean. I attended Booker T. Washington School back in 1952, went from 1st grade up until 8th grade. The principal at the time was Marcicola S. Blackburn, and the secretary was Helen P. Hicks. My 1st grade teacher was Lillian R. Sopham. 2nd grade was my godmother, Flossie Buckner. 3rd grade was Caroline Blackson for the 1st semester. And then the 2nd semester, they were able to add on another 3rd grade, and my aunt Mildred Weston taught. Though my best year was the year when I reached 4th grade, my mother taught me, and that was just a thrill for me to have my mom teach me. During school time, she was Mrs. Fisher, but as soon as the bell rang for us to go home, she became Mommy. My father at that time, he was the only one that could sign my report cards or anything. I wanted to be treated just like the rest of the kids at Booker T. The 6th grade teacher was Cornelia Johns. My 7th grade teacher, they divided us then. We had Thelma Drainen, my homeroom teacher, William Stevenson, he taught me my math, and Alfred Johnson did the social studies and science. Mrs. Drain taught us our music. After 7th grade, I migrated over to William W.M. Henry Comprehensive High School. My other memories here at Booker T were that we had a cafeteria out there in the main part, and Mrs. Lamb was the cafeteria manager, and we loved going there. Mrs. Mary C. Floyd, who was an aunt, she taught me home ec. Our gym was limited at that time. And it was just a great experience. I did serve on the committee when they changed our Booker T. Washington Elementary School to West Dover. Mr. Hicks asked me to serve, and I did serve, and we were so glad when they came back to Booker T because we knew that this was the only elementary school that us as African Americans could relate to. Same thing with William Henry. Those were the only things we had to hold on to. I don't know if most people realize that there were 3 African American high schools here in Delaware. The first one was up in Newcastle County, which was Louis L. Reddy. The second one was William Henry, and the third was down in Georgetown. Drain, the music teacher, wrote the alma mater for William Henry. She moved over to William Henry after we went there, but when I was starting here, it was grades 1 through 8. Mr. Hardcastle became the principal. He never taught me as a teacher, but I knew him very well. And today, to be able to come to look at some of the memories and to visualize where some of the classrooms were. My mother's classroom, if you go out through the doors, the first hallway to the right was her 4th grade classroom. Mr. Harry Blackson was the chief custodian at that time, and he'd have to come and get the boilers running. So we would have Pete, and he did an excellent job of doing that. It is, like I said, a great memory now to be able to come and see just what went down when I was growing up here. Mrs. Cooper had the little round room outside. That was the kindergarten. We didn't have kindergarten. We started right from 1st grade, and the kids of today do not understand that they're fortunate to be able to have pre-K and then kindergarten. My second grandchild, Deshaun, he went here for ECAP. He was the only one of my grandkids that came through Booker T for ECAP or anything. And when he found out that his Nana, that's what they called my mother, taught here, he was just elated to think, oh, I'm at the school where Nana taught, and I'm at the school where my grandmother went. This used to be Mr. Blackburn's office, and the office over there was Mrs. Hicks. And she was the only secretary we had, and he was our new principal. And it's been a pleasure. We will give you some of the history of Booker T. Washington Elementary School back in the day.
My name is Jean Holden Solomon. I was born in 1938. I was born on Kirkwood Street, North Kirkwood Street, 124 was the house number. We lived on Fulton Street at first, and then in 1942, we moved on West Forest Street. A lot of people call it Route 8, the new people. The people that are originally from Dover call it Forest Street, spelled with one R. So a lot of people get confused also with the name of Forest Street, because from Salisbury Road intersection and Forest intersection, it's going west, is called Forest Avenue, and it's spelled with two R's, Forest Street. So when we moved to Forest Street, we lived next door to Booker T. Washington School, which is on the west side of Booker T. Washington. In 1944, I entered the first grade at Booker T. Washington Elementary School. All the teachers that I had during the whole time I attended Booker T. Washington School, they knew my parents, even the principal. We were well known in Dover because my mother was born in Dover also. Her family originated in the 1800s, which I done a genealogy. My mother is connected with the Lenape Indians, which is the Delaware Indians, and we have relatives in Bridgeton, New Jersey. So getting back to the school days at Booker T. Washington School, it was quite an adventure because, as I said, the teachers knew my parents, and I couldn't get away with anything because if they reported to my mother if I was bad in school, they would know it before I got home. By living next door, the communication was quick. But it was good because we were like family, the whole school. And a lot of this, it was all black. It was not integrated at the time. So Dover High School had their school and we had our school. Now when we had band uniforms, we got them from Dover High Band. When they got new uniforms, they gave us our old uniforms. And that also applied to the books. When they got new books, we got the old ones. Also, we had a lot of activities going on at our school. We had our band, we had sports, we had home economics, we had science, we had math, we had English, and we also had
for the boys, we had shop and mechanics. All the students in our school always had things to do. Everybody was busy, active. No one was left behind unless they really wanted to, like skipping school or something like that. But long as you were on the school grounds, you were accounted for, and the principal knew who you were and where you're supposed to be at the time of school. So it was like a family affair, and it was we were very close, very close. Also, when I entered the high school, I mean not the high school, the junior high school part of Booker T, we used to trade classes. I think it started in the 6th grade that we would exchange classes. Now, I was a Girl Scout, and during, like once a month, we would have social affair. And during that time, we would go to Richardson and Robinson. That was the factory that made chicken. They canned chicken. And the skin of the chicken, they would sell them in bags. So we would walk in town on Kings Highway, where the factory was, and we would get a bag of chicken skins. And then we walked back, and by the time we got back to the school, the bag was greasy because of the chicken skins. But when we got there, we took all the meat off from the skin, and we had chicken salad. So then we threw the skin away. So I remember that. Also, I remember home economics, and we used to cook in class. We sewed. Miss Floyd was our teacher at the time. Also, we had May Day. I remember the first day in May, or maybe before the week was out, we would have May Day. And we would wrap the maypole. And the maypole, we had streamers coming from the maypole, different colors. And the colors that was chosen by our teacher for us to wrap, that's the color that we wore that day. If we could afford those clothes, that's the color that we would wear. And it was a big event. It was, everybody just had a good time as far as May Day. Also, I remember in front of the Booker T. Washington School, they had a cherry tree. And by us, my sister and I, her name is Ann Holden Thompson, she and I would go, and my brother William Holden, we would climb the cherry tree in front of Booker T. Washington. And the cherries were so good. They were so big and sweet. And when my mother be out calling us, she'd be looking for us. And here we are up in the cherry tree eating these cherries. We ate so many by the time we got home, our stomachs were churning. And she said, well, where have you been? We would say, we were up in the tree eating cherries. So it was a great time. And then my sister Ann, she remembers the black walnut tree that was a couple yards down from the cherry tree. I don't remember the walnut tree, but she did. And also I remember my brother. He was the last one to get to attend school. He was always late. But we living right next door. He would lay in bed and hear the last bell ring, and he'd jump out of bed and then come to school. And my mother would fuss because she would say kids would be bused from different areas, like Magnolia, Smyrna, even Harrington. They all would come to Booker T. Washington School. And that was because a lot of those Royal schools were only went far as the, I think the 7th grade. So they bused the students in to attend the 8th and 9th grade, up until the 10th grade, because 11th and 12th grade was at Delaware State College. And my oldest sister, she was the last graduating class from Delaware State College in 1952. She was the last of that graduation class. By then they had built William Henry High School. I attend William Henry High School from the 10th grade up because I was the last of the students to attend Booker T. Because my sister Ann and my brother, they were the second. That's what I remember. But we just had a great time, and of course I remember my brother when we were at Booker T. The principal, Mr. Marcellus Blackburn, he had his office in the front of Booker T, and we had an auditorium, and then the classrooms were on each side, and in the back,
The way they are sort of now.
yes,
Yeah.
and then in the back was the stage, and we also on the stage, and we had a classroom which was the music room, and so my brother and his gang, I remember they would sneak out of class and they would crawl across the floor because Mr. Blackburn's office, he kept his door open all the time, but his desk was so tall that he couldn't see unless he stood up. So my brother and his gang, they would go on one side and go on the other, but when they want to exchange position, they would crawl across the floor to keep from the principal seeing them. So that was really a fun thing, and they really played that up. So it was nice. Thank you.
Don't know the year, but I graduated in 1957. I graduated in 1963. I was valedictorian in my class, and I was one of the two that was chosen to go to Dover High to start the integration process. So that's all I can say, but I remember so much. I remember the cafeteria. My mother worked in the cafeteria. It was just good to be back in here again. A lot of the things are basically the same, so it's good. It's good. It's good history. Good history. They think about coming here. It's my first time back since I left, so I appreciate it.
My name is Vivian Brown Starnes. I am the granddaughter of Mr. James Brown, who used to be the janitorial man here at Booker T School years ago. There's a picture of him up on the wall in the case, him standing posing for a picture with the staff. And I was here from the first grade to the 8th grade. Mrs. Sockham was my first grade teacher. Miss Buckner was my second grade teacher. Mrs. I think her name was Blackston was my third grade teacher, and my fourth grade teacher was what was her name? Bedford, and my fifth grade teacher was Mrs. Fisher, and I think my sixth grade teacher was Miss Cordelia Johns. My seventh grade teacher was Mr. Stevenson, and my eighth grade teacher was Mrs. McIntosh. So I left Booker T and went to William Henry High, and I graduated in 1957. So it was a very nice place to grow up in. I enjoyed it. Had good memories of the band, the chorus, the glee club. Just all kinds of good things came out of Booker T School because it was like a family setting. Because what you didn't get at home, the teachers tried to give it to you in the school. And if you weren't acting right, you best believe Mom and Dad heard about it because they were really connected. So I really loved it, and that's it.
Okay, my name is Bessie Stroud Crane, and I really do not remember what year I started here. I didn't think about that part of it, but I enjoyed coming to Booker T, Washington. The first person I would always meet in the morning was Mr. Blackburn. He welcomed every student out front. In the wintertime, because we walked to school, he would come out, take us into the bathroom, to wash our hands in cold water to thaw our hands. Grade teacher was Mrs. Sockham. She was a very strict lady. A lot of people didn't like her because she would paddle you with no problem. But I liked her. And when it was time to go home, she would have everyone line up and give her a kiss before it was time to go home. But she also had ballet and tap dancing, and we learned how to do that. And then we would have a little program with the waltz, ballet, and tap dancing.
Oh, nice.
And that was the first grade. And the other teachers were great teachers, but I remember her more. And Mrs. Stevenson, she was my fourth grade teacher. She was quiet, she wasn't strict, but she just made sure you learned. And she, like I said, she just made sure you learned, and she wasn't pushy. You know, she just made sure that all of us learned. And all of the other teachers made sure that we had our manners in check, made sure we were clean, and made sure that we respected ourselves and that we were supposed to learn. Not that we could not learn, but we were supposed to learn. And we had no other choice but to do that. And I just had a good time here. I really.
My name is Sharita Laws Matthews. I was a student at Booker T. Washington School all the way through the 8th grade. My fondest memories are of Mr. Blackburn and all my teachers, 1st grade through the 8th grade. Lillian Sockham was the famous 1st grade teacher. She was excellent in reading. Now, I have a very interesting story, I believe, because Mr. Blackburn was a forward-thinking man. It just so happened that the summer before, after I was 4 years old, I had traveled with family across country and learned to read. And so when I returned, Mr. Blackburn said that I should not miss readiness stages. Therefore, he allowed me to start 1st grade when I was still 4. I was just 5 a month after I started 1st grade. Then when I went to the 2nd grade, the teacher kept me for 2 weeks and said I was too advanced for the rest of the kids, and they sent me on to 3rd grade. Mr. Blackburn was a wonderful principal, and he saw to it that all of us, all of the students, had a public speaking experience. And he accomplished that through having each classroom teacher be responsible for a monthly assembly in the multi-purpose room. So we had opportunities to conduct plays, to recite poetry, and so forth and so on, so that we were not afraid to speak in public. Another favorite memory of mine was walking to school every day with my dad. He would carry my books. At one time there was a dirt and then a stone walkway up to the front of the school. And so, it was really wonderful to go to school with Dad. Now, the reason I mention that is because he taught here and served as vice principal for his, I think, at least 25 years here in this building. He also taught industrial arts, and at one period he taught social studies. So, those were my fond memories. Then the last memory is the fact that I remember Mr. Blackburn as my neighbor, as they lived just 3 doors down the street. And he and his wife were quite wonderful. I had an opportunity to be taken care of by Mrs. Blackburn while my parents were at work before I started school. So I got to know them very well, both as neighbors and as principal and educators. As a result of all that good training I had at Booker T, I was the first student to enroll in Dover High School after the Supreme Court decision. And then you've all heard about the Brown versus Board of Education. The 50th anniversary was a big event, and USA Today saw fit to come here to Dover. We actually went to Central Middle School, which was in Dover High when I was in high school, took pictures, did quite an interview. They stayed a second day so that they could interview both me and my mother, who is an icon here in the state and in the country. Learn to labor and to write, wait, Dover girls, form good habits while you're young. Learn what duty really means, Dover boys, and why shirking is not fun. Learn to be polite and gentle, kind and loving all the while. Learn what makes a child successful and gives them joy and happiness. And gives them joy and happiness. That song was written by Mr. Blackburn, who had musical talents, and he also conducted the school band. I was in it, and at one time I was a little drum major. Summer when the school's multi-purpose room needed a new floor, and the reason for that was it was being used as multi-purpose phys ed, intramurals, extramurals, cafeteria. It was truly a multi-purpose room, and the floor had gotten quite worn. So one summer my dad, since he taught industrial arts, was commissioned to put down a new wooden floor in the multi-purpose room. He employed 2 or 3 of his best shop students who assisted him, and so they put down the new floor. And I can recall field day, so we look forward to that, and other special programs, and wrapping the maypole. We had May Day, we had field trips to Philadelphia, to the zoo, and to the historical buildings there.
Nice.
Almost every year. So it was just fond memories, some of which are coming back even at this moment.
My name is Doretha Kale. I came to Booker T. Washington, and I started from the 1st grade to the 6th grade. My teachers was Miss Socken, 1st grade. Miss Butner was my 2nd grade teacher. My 3rd grade teacher was Theresa Holmes. 4th grade teacher was Mrs. Mosley. 5th grade teacher was Mr. Alfred Johnson. 6th grade teacher was Mr. Howard Stevenson, and I loved it here. Can remember being with Miss Sockham. She was the type of person that she would find out what were your gifts. So therefore we did. Everyone had to do tap dancing, so everyone had your shoes to learn how to tap dance. Ballerina, playing instruments when you were artists, and that was my first time being able to do bulletin boards and find out that art was what I wanted to, that was my niche, that's what I wanted to do. And from there, seemed like every class I went to, I learned to do their bulletin boards. That's what I wanted to do. Second grade was a kind of hard. Miss Buckner, she was a kind of rough teacher. I hated to go to school. I remember when they told us all that we had to be in her classroom. I think the whole line of children were crying. But, you know, she learned us how to respect and obedience. That was the class for obedience. Third grade class, didn't remember too much about it, but I know that I still enjoyed everything that we did within the school. I remember being in the auditorium room, and when they had the air raids, we all had to bend down with the air raids and tuck our heads between our legs. I remember that we all had to learn this one poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, and it was lines, bless thee Lord, don't you know the days are born. If you don't get up, you scamp, there'll be trouble in this camp. And I remember the plays that we all did, you know. And everybody seemed to know that particular poem. And when I graduated from college, because they had made me think that I would never get, when I left out of this school going to the other school, it seemed like they were putting into me that I would never be anyone. I didn't want to, I would never be who I wanted to be, and I knew I wanted to be an artist. So I ended up going to a trade school, and down in Woodside, it was called Kent Votech, and I became an artist. And I left from out of there, and I decided while working on my job, I'd been there for 30 some years, that I wanted to go back to school to be a graphic artist. And right before graduating in 2002, we had to do a painting called A Cause. And during this time, they were changing Booker T back from Westover to Booker T, and I'm like, that's it right there. So I did the painting for Booker T. Washington, which is called The Cause. That was my cause. I've changed the name back to letting people know the history of Booker T. And the school, Del Tech, bought the gold frame for it, and I asked the school would they accept it as a donation. Because the really school meant so much to me, and to be able to ride by and to tell my daughter and my grandchildren, this is where I went to elementary school, but they implemented so much in you to let you know you could be whoever you wanted to be. And since then I've got another degree, so I'm working on my doctorate now in theologian, so I don't think I'm going to stop, because I can be whoever I want to be. And I got that from Booker T. Washington.
First grade here, and there was no kindergarten at that time, and so we went from first grade. I went first through sixth,
and I went first to the eighth. I graduated from the 8th grade, and we used to graduate from the 6th grade, and we called it elementary school. And I didn't get to graduate because I graduated, but I was sick. I didn't get to say my point. And then we graduated from the 8th grade. Then we went to William Henry.
So I did get to say my speech because I was the 6th grade valedictorian.
Oh. And plus she was the 12th grade
valedictorian from Will Henry. So. But I've got 2 good attendance certificates from Booker T. Washington. 4 years.
So you can see it.
4 years perfect
Can you
attendance.
zoom in a little bit?
Honor attendance, and 5 years honor attendance. And signed by Marcellus S. Marcellus Blackburn, that was the principal, of course, and same on this one.
Oh, nice.
So we're a long time Dover residents, and went through the Dover, or the Capital School District, and so we're part of Booker T. Washington's history. So we had teachers first grade, Lillian R. Sockham, 2nd grade, Ms. Buckner, 3rd grade,
Miss Blackson,
and 4th grade,
Miss Fisher,
Marjorie Fisher.
And she had 3 generations of our family. She had my father, me, and my son. And after that she retired. I think my son calls her retired.
But most of our teachers we had for several generations. like I said, first grade, Mrs. Sockham, second grade, Miss Buckner, third grade, Miss Blackson, fourth grade, Miss Fisher, fifth grade, and Miss Bedford, Mildred Bedford. Sixth grade is when I got Elizabeth Palmer, I think that was her name. And then the one over second, yeah. So and I used, I became a school teacher, and so did she. And I used some of my teaching methods that I had grown up with, you know, from some of the very solid teachers here at Booker T. Washington.
Today is July the 31st, and I'm attending the second opening of the rebirth of my Booker T. Washington School, our Booker T. Washington School. I was unable to attend the March grand opening because I had to, our granddaughter had gotten married in Illinois, so I was unable to attend that. First of all, let me explain who I am. My name is William L. Holden, Jr. I'm now 82. My class in 1952 was the last graduating class from this school, Booker T. Washington School. My class in 1952, school year 51-52, was the last 10th grade graduating class from my new rebirth Booker T. Washington School. And I was the second graduating class from William Henry Comprehensive High School, which was in 1954. Our property was on the west side of this building. We lived there from 1942. We moved on the west side in 1942. And it's just a matter of me coming around the fence and being on time for school from the 1st to the 10th grade. While here, I played basketball at Booker T because it was a junior high school from grades 1 to 10. And we didn't have organized football until 1952, 53. At that time, William W. Henry had opened, and the state allowed us to, because of the Comprehensive High School, they allowed us to have football along with track, which we didn't have here. Booker T. Washington had baseball, and that was it. Basketball, I'm sorry. I was chosen by the school district, Dr. Michael Thomas, to be a part of the construction committee, executive committee, here in the district. And our first meeting was August the 28th. I have this is the original copy of the first meeting, August the 28th, 2013. Dr. Michael Thomas was the superintendent at that time. People that attended the first meeting was James Trowler, Sam Christensen, Elliot Harden, Sam Shalosky, William Holden Jr., along with a retired school teacher, Miss Susan B. Young. She attended the very first executive board meeting with me, and Christopher Lehman, Carl Kirsten, Brian Williams, and these were members of the ABHA. That was the architect firm that that done the reconstruction, the architect part of the building. And Kevin Lucas, I think he was the general superintendent for Ernst de Sabatino Company, along with Brad Croin. Those were representatives of EDS, Ernst de Sabatino Construction Company. There was a total of 35 executive meetings that I attended, and the last one that I attended was was August the 20th. That's number one. I'm sorry. I thought I had everything organized, which I had, but you know how that goes. Some of the papers are every place else. The last meeting number 34 was July the 6th, 2016, which precluded the last meeting number 35 was July the 17th, 16. So, being a member of the construction committee for Booker T. Washington, I was presented by Dr. Dan Shelton, April the 27th of 2016, Capital School District Appreciation for being a member of the construction committee. And also on my lapel, I have the lapel rewards that I received, which goes along with this entitlement. So I'll probably wear that from the Capital District. And I guess that's just about it. I do have some articles here that were taken. This is 2016. This was taken the front of our school with Dr. Dale, the principal of Booker T. Washington, Dale Brown, which is a good picture. That was in the newspaper, so that was an article that I saved. That was in the hallway. Another article, that's the same one, so I guess that's about it. I was glad to be able to attend those 35 executive meetings. I only missed 2. So it was an honor for me to be a part of the rebirth of our Booker T. Washington School. And the Capital District is calling this school Booker T. Washington Elementary. But that really isn't the right name. That's my opinion. This school was recreated, and the rebirth of it was to house a part of the KCCS, which is Kent County Community School Kids. So, in my opinion, Booker T. Washington School is a KCCS school. Principal Brown made sure that that title didn't go on as the name of the school. So as it stands now, it is Booker T. Washington School. So I hope everybody will always remember that. And it's a BTW school to house KCCS, Kent County Community School students. So I thank you for the time.
All right, my name is Reba Ellen Ross Hollingsworth, PhD. I don't know whether that made any sense or not, but anyway, I have, I'm a native Delawarean. I have traced my family on my mother's side back to beyond 1790 in Kent County. And they were free people, so, and they owned land and so forth. As a matter of fact, Scott's Corner out near Ballard's Beach is the land that my family owned, and it still is on the road map right now. And I've traced my dad's side back to 1850 and a little bit beyond that, because they were slaves, and of course they didn't keep records of slaves by name until after the 1850 census and so forth. But I was always told that we were related to Harriet Ross Tubman. And so I've been doing some research on that, and I think I've really made the connection there that my grandfather's great-grandfather, I guess it is, and Harriet Ross's father were cousins. So, but I'm looking for more information. But I also found, too, that Harriet's grandmother came from the same village in Africa, in Ghana, where I am a queen mother. but I didn't know that when I was over there being installed at the time. But anyway, the connection is there that I'm a native Delawarean, born, bred, christened, and wed. It runs in my blood. And of course, as I must also say, I guess, that I'm 91 years old. And so I've been around a while.
That's great.
And I suppose the thing that you're most interested in is why I came to Booker T if I was born and reared and lived in Milford. And of course, those of you who know anything at all about the history of education in Delaware and of course in the country, especially the southern part of the country, know that the schools were segregated. And in Delaware, when you go back to read the history of education in Delaware, they really didn't pay much attention to the education of blacks or whites in Delaware until the late 1800s. And so many of the churches, the black churches, actually were the ones who provided education for black people. And I must say that too, because when you read the history, we have been everything from Negroes to Negroes, to colored, to black and African American. Personally, I prefer that I'm a Delawarean, a native, because I have been here and my family has been here longer than a whole lot of other people. And so I don't see the real need always to differentiate by color. But that's my own personal bias.
Yeah.
But
No,
it is a
you're
part
right.
of my history, and I have to share that because it does reflect on the topic of today. And that is why I had to come to Booker T as a 10th grade student when I was born and reared in Milford and could walk to Milford High School from where I lived. But of course the schools were segregated, as I mentioned earlier, and Benjamin Banneker, which was actually Milford School number 3C when I was a student there. And you know that the C always stood for colored, so that was the way you designated the schools in the state of Delaware for between, actually the colored was the C, the whites were not designated with anything except the name. But it only went to the 8th grade when I started there in the 1st grade. And then while I was there, they added the 9th grade. And so I went through from 1st through 9th grade in Milford. Actually, I started 1st grade in Lincoln from September until Christmas when our family moved into Milford because we lived in Lincoln at that time. But anyway, I was in Milford from 1st grade through 9th grade. And if you read anything much about the history of blacks, you know that many of the black students only completed the education that was offered in their schools because a lot of the parents could not afford to let their students leave home. Some of them needed them to work. And sometimes it was really difficult because the only high school in the state at the time that went, true high school was at Howard High School in Wilmington. And if you happened to live in Kent or Sussex County, it was difficult to get there. And of course, Delaware State College at the time had what they called the laboratory high school that they opened in, I think, in the 20s, around the same time Booker T was opened. But then the year that I was to go to the 10th grade was the same year Delaware State moved their 10th grade over to Booker T. And that was in 1942. And so I had to come to Dover because my dad wouldn't let me go to Wilmington to live with an aunt who lived actually diagonally across the street from Howard High School, but he just didn't want me in the city in that environment at the time. But 2 girls and I in my class rented a room across the street from Booker T, and we shared a double bed in a small room. The woman gave us cooking privileges, but we had no real supervision as such. She just rented girls' rooms, some of them who worked at the Elkton Powder Plant, and some of them who went to college. And she was an older woman, and that was the part of her income, was to rent rooms. And I don't remember how much the room was because the state actually paid her the check for me to come. And we came up on Sunday evenings from Milford and went back home on Friday evenings, riding the short line bus for 35 cents. I remember that. But on the 5 days that we were here in Dover going to school, we were completely on our own at 15 years old, which was, when I tell my husband about that, he would just kind of cringe because he just thought that was really kind of young to be on your own, which it was, I guess, but if we had not had a good, strong family background, we probably would not have been able to survive it. It was a different school, but I must tell you about Booker T. Of all the schools that the DuPont built, it was the only one that had a floor plan with the auditorium in the center and the classrooms around it. And the reason for that was that Dover, of course, was kind of like the hub, the capital, and there were no meeting places for blacks to congregate for anything, any conferences or anything. So he added the auditorium so that the blacks would have a meeting hall and a place to do whatever they needed to, where they needed space. And so that was the only school in the state that he built like that.
Wow.
And all the other schools were either 2, 3, 4, or 5 room schools, and most of them had a partition, a door, what they call that they could open between classrooms.
Like a pocket door?
Pardon?
Like pocket doors almost?
Well, some of them were pocket, but they were actually folding doors.
Oh, okay.
By the time they folded out, so. And then they could open 2 rooms and give a larger.
Yeah, some of the schools have that now. Yeah.
Right. But it was interesting. There we didn't have science in an office kind of thing. We had the home economics department was in the basement. I thought that was kind of unusual until I went over to Central Middle School, which is Dover High School at that time, and found out their home ec department was in the basement too, but so were other classes, the wood shop and all that. But at any rate, I was interested in home economics and interested in getting decent grades, and I remember that Mr. Stevenson had come to Milford to do his student teaching when I was in the 9th grade, and then when I got to Booker T, he was the teacher, social studies teacher there. So, and his sister and I were classmates, Frances and I. So, but we became friends, and of course there are not very many of us left out of that class now, but there weren't that many to begin with, I guess. I've forgotten how many were in that class, maybe 12, 15, or something like that.
Is that right?
But not many of us. Most of us went on to Delaware State after we finished the 10th grade and finished the 11th and 12th grade there and stayed on for college. I don't think any of the teachers are still living that I can think of that were there when I was there. But Mr. Blackburn was very kind to us. I remember that he was from Virginia, Western Virginia, and I think one Easter he and his wife took me to Virginia with him. That was right on the borderline of West Virginia and Harrisonburg, Virginia. And that was an interesting trip, but I felt kind of privileged that my parents would let me go with Mr. and Mrs. Blackburn on a trip like that, because I always had a wanderlust, so I've traveled a lot. But anyway, as far as Booker T is concerned, Booker T was one of those people that we learned about in school. We did not have what we call Black History Month. We had Negro History Week that was started by Carter G. Woodson. And Carter G. Woodson's niece was my 2nd grade teacher. And so he came to visit one time and we got to actually meet him.
Oh, nice.
And so the people who were what we call famous blacks at the time were people that we studied and looked up to them. And of course Martin Luther King and those people came along a little bit later, but this Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver and those people were the ones that we really, Harriet Tubman, people who resisted slavery, some of those who died as a result of it, and those who came out of it and really contributed to the growth of the Negro population, especially through the education. And Booker T. Washington, I don't know whether you know that he actually went to Hampton At that time it was Hampton Institute. And after the end of slavery, his mother moved to where the father was working over in West Virginia and worked on the salt mines over there as a young kid. And when he was 16 or 17, he just left home and hitchhiked and walked from West Virginia over to Hampton because he wanted an education. And when he got there, I think he said something like 20 cents or 25 cents in his pocket, and they didn't know whether he was going to be able to be admitted to Hampton or not. Of course he did, and got a job working as a custodian there as a addition. Well, you probably know all that part about the history of it.
Not really, but that's it. That's really.
But anyway,
fascinating.
his autobiography, Up from Slavery, gives a lot of that information, and I would urge everybody
To read it.
To read it.
Yeah.
You know, whether you are a student at Booker T or have been,
Right.
or whether you are simply are a citizen, you ought to read his autobiography. Some of his philosophy was not quite accepted by a lot of the more progressive blacks at the time, because he believed that there was a place for you and you had to work yourself up. Some of the attitudes that a lot of whites have, you know, that you can never, no matter what you do, rise to the same level as white people in the society. But if you worked hard, you'd be able to be accepted, was kind of what his philosophy was. It worked for him because he was able then to become the president of Tuskegee Institute and contributed again to the education of a lot of blacks and so forth. So, you know, even though his philosophy was not as accepted as William B. Du Bois and some of the others, it contributed to our history. So, but I did want to share, I guess, the opening of Booker T. Actually, it opened on November the 13th, 1922. And some of the people say 23 or 24, but actually the students from the two colored schools inside Dover, one was on Slaughter Street next to what was at the time Watcote Church, and another was over on Division Street. And they came together and walked down Division Street, the students and their teachers, by grades, to Booker T. And they had an opening ceremony there, and there's a copy, the information here about their opening ceremony and the participants and the things that they did and all that. Mr. Hardcastle and Mr. Bedford were two of the students who were in the group that walked down to Booker T and were in the class there. And the teachers came along with them. So if anybody's interested in that, then we could share that with them. But anyway, it talks about the new Booker T school and the students who came and how proud they were to be in the building, because the buildings that they were housed in town were kind of so dilapidated, and in 1922 we were really just a half minute out of slavery, and a lot of people didn't value education anyway. And as a matter of fact, if you read through the history of integration, you'll find that some of the schools were actually burned. One of the DuPont schools was burned in Slaughter Neck by some racist whites who said that blacks didn't need any education. And so they burned the school just before it was ready to open. But then it was rebuilt. So it was really a struggle for blacks to be educated. Many of them had to teach themselves. A lot of things that I learned I had to teach myself. Most of us had to really be very, very assertive in order to get an education, because nobody really valued it, and it was expensive in a way, although it didn't cost much in today's terms, but it was expensive if you had no money to get to school. And even when you read the history of the amount of money that the state actually contributed to the education of blacks, a pittance.
Yeah.
A pittance. As a matter of fact, in most instances, the state wouldn't even provide any money. They taxed the black people, even taxed the dogs the black people owned, in order supposedly to pay for the education of blacks in school. So if you know that history about it, then I don't think we'd be so quick to destroy the buildings that we finally were able to achieve that meant so much to actually the education of the majority. It was a struggle. My mother actually was a student, and I think there's a picture in this book of the school that she attended at elementary school, which was really dilapidated. And she did go to Delaware State College High School and graduated, got married, and wanted to go back to finish college because at the time they had 2-year college there. And she had all children, and she decided after the 4th one she probably couldn't go back. So, but she did. She was the one who taught us to read and to write and to use good diction and not to hang prepositions on the end of our sentences and all that. And my dad went to Delaware State High School for 1 month in 9th grade, and his father sent a letter to the president asking that he be sent home because his father needed him to work on the farm. So he was never able to go back, but he was a math wizard, you know, to the point that he was read a problem and say, well, the answer is such and such, you figure out how to get it. Or after we had done our homework at the table, then he would check our math, my mother would check our English and so forth, our compositions. And so I know that, you know, I came from a household that was a little bit different than some of the other blacks at the time. But I really, you know, as I have gotten older, really have felt very, very blessed and fortunate to have parents who valued education because, you know, at 14, I left home and went to work at Rehoboth and I never stayed home but 1 year after that. And I was able to travel. When I got married, I married a man who also liked to travel, so
That's good.
we drove in all the 48 of the 50 states and traveled to the other
nice.
2. And then this is not a part of Booker T, but anyway, it's a part of what I became as a result of being in Booker T.
Right, yeah.
But we've traveled in Europe. As a matter of fact, in the 70s, we would take American students overseas on foreign study tours. And every other year, we'd bring European students over here and take them on study tours in the United States. So as a result of that, we really got to study in a lot of, well, actually see a lot of the country, a lot of the world. As I don't know, let's see, England, these are the countries that we've had, England, France, Germany, Switzerland, Holland, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, Greece, the ones I can think of right offhand. And then we've traveled in Africa.
Nice.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to Africa in February. Going to South Africa.
Nice.
But there's a big wide world out there, and once you get to traveling and meeting other people, it helps you to appreciate what we have here, even though some of it is really very, very narrow-minded and mean-spirited and ugly. But you at least learn how, if you are confident in who you are, to compete and to combat some of the stuff that you have to deal with. And I fortunately have been, and I say that too with pride, outspoken. And well, my dad taught us to be so. And we were growing up, he said, the folks are as good as the people, and you don't have to bend over and take low for anybody. We learned that that color did not really identify and define us as individuals. Maybe somebody else thought so, but it didn't. I mean, I didn't like some of the things that were done, and I have always talked about them because I think that when you've not experienced something, you have no way of knowing about it. So I've just taken that on as one of the things that I do is try to help educate folk. But anyway, is there anything else you really wanted to?
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
The school song was really written by Mr. Blackburn. And the words of it, I think I shared at the ribbon cutting. And then there was another school song because evidently when Mr. Wilson was principal there, he probably didn't know about the song. And so he and his wife wrote another song, but the original Booker T. Washington song is the one that's written.